Hello, I am the Reverend Nima Cyrus Franklin, Project Coordinator for the Presbyterian Church U.S.A.'s Around the Table initiative. If you are a faith leader, a parent, a grandparent, a caregiver, or a mentor, or perhaps just someone who loves and guides young people, you are in the right place. We know these are not easy times. Our children and youth are growing up in a world shaped by natural disasters, by uncertainty, by war and violence, and constant change. And as the caring adults in their lives, we often feel the weight of trying to protect them, guide them, and still help them hope in God. And so that's why we created Around the Table. We want to support you in sharing faith in Jesus Christ right at home or in your church community with intention, with care, and with relevance for the world that we're living in today. This series of short videos offers you practical tools, not to add more to your to-do list, but simply to help you to slow down, to center, and to ground your sharing in something deeper. These videos are not just information to force our children to believe, but to help us invite them into a deeper relationship with God in their everyday experiences. So you'll hear from pastors, therapists, parents, and community leaders who bring wisdom and lived experience to topics like trauma-informed parenting, holy listening, storytelling, inclusion, mental health, justice, and simply how to share hope. Each video is paired with a simple worksheet to help you put what you're learning right into practice, and you can find that linked in the description box. So you can also visit our website at pcusa.org/around the table resources for more details and any other information you might need for our initiative. Our prayer is that these conversations help you find strength for today and guidance for the days ahead, because you don't have to do this alone, and because we can't do this alone. So let's grow and let's feast together around the table. God bless you.
Hello, my name is Sara Pantazes. I'm the Director of Faith Formation at First Presbyterian Church in Westchester, Pennsylvania, and the founder of the Young Justice Builders program. I'm happy to be with you today as part of Around the Table. I'll be offering some reflections and practical skills from my area of expertise, which is the intersection of faith formation, children and families, and justice. More specifically, I'll be focusing today on the idea of having faith-based political conversations with kids. As Abraham Lincoln said, we live in a country that is for the people and by the people, which means that we, the people, need to understand and participate in civic life. And as people of faith, our participation in civic life is one way that we put our faith into action. Now, if you have especially young children, you may be wondering if this information is relevant to you. And to that, I would say, I believe it is better to talk with kids about what's going on in the world around them, even if they are hard things, than to not talk about them. And it's certainly better to talk about them than to ignore them. And if we do that when they are young, elementary aged, that sets them up to know that they can keep talking with us about those things when they are older and able to think about current affairs and injustices more and more critically. So while you will need to adapt the information I share to your specific children and their ages, there is something here for everyone, and it's never too early to start learning and participating. So here is the question we will seek to answer. How do we have productive, faith-based, age-appropriate conversations with children about current events, particularly when those issues feel overwhelming or unjust? We're going to seek to answer that question through the lens of the CARE disciplines. I think this works because the disciplines are about storytelling, and that's what political conversations are. We are telling stories about the communities and country we are a part of, what's happening, what the challenges are, and how people are working together, or not, to address those challenges. So let's get into it. The C of the care disciplines stands for create hospitable space, which leads me to this question. What can we do to create a hospitable environment that normalizes and welcomes political conversations? The answer lies in considering some of these factors. Ask yourself, how do I react to politics? If you react loudly or forcefully, it is possible that will deter your children and even other adults from wanting to talk with you. Coming in hot is not hospitable. If this is you, I would encourage you to find a regular person that you can vent with and process the news with. Get that energy out elsewhere so that it doesn't come out onto your kids. On the other hand, if you can't stand political conversations, if you try to get out of them as quickly as possible, there may be good reasons for that. But it also might be sending the message to your children that political conversations are to be avoided. So, not engaging is also not hospitable. Our goal is to work towards being adults who can take in the news, have reasonable reactions to what we hear, and be able to talk about it. And if we model that behavior, this will teach our kids that being informed is important, that you care about our civic life, which invites them to care, and that you are a safe person to talk to. The next thing we can do is strive to be news and media wise. This means, firstly, that you should seek to be informed, but not overly informed. So think about what sources you receive your news from. Did you choose them intentionally, or do they just kind of come your way? Do you pay for any of them? And if not, are you confident that you're consuming high quality journalism? Because that does matter. Do your news sources have a bias in one direction or another? Think about whether and how you might need to recalibrate in response to those questions so that you are wisely informed. You can also ask, what is the news and media environment in your home? And depending on the amount of time you spend in your home may also include your car. Do you have the news on more often than not? Even if your children don't seem to be listening or watching, they will hear and take in that content. And generally speaking, if you think what they're hearing is too much for them, it's quite possibly too much for you as well. In this instance, being overly informed isn't necessarily a good thing. So strive to follow reputable news sources and stay away from the rest. Now, that's hard on social media, which shows us news whether we want it to or not. But perhaps that is yet another sign for us to spend less time on social media. I included a link to a worksheet in the resources document that gives you more questions and guidance in this area if you feel like you want to work on building your wisdom around analyzing news and media. The next thing we can do is build our political conversation skills. Choose the right time to have these conversations. If your child brings up a political question while you are trying to get dinner finished before rushing another child out the door to practice, it's okay to say, "That's a great question. Can we talk about it when I'm home for practice?" Because if you are frazzled or distracted or overly tired, the conversation is not going to go well. So don't hesitate to delay, but make sure you do come back to it. We also want our conversations to be age appropriate. Whatever question your child asks, try answering it with the most basic answer you can and then pause. You may have just said enough. If they want to know more, they'll ask a follow up question. So follow their lead, and I'll say more about asking questions and staying age appropriate in a minute. Also, don't try to accomplish too much in one conversation. Sometimes kids are just asking for the facts, and if that's the case, just answer their question. Answering the question and then launching into a soliloquy of your opinion on the topic probably will not be that helpful, and that's also not a conversation. So it's okay for some or even most conversations to be short, maybe even easy. The longer and harder ones will come when your kids are old enough for it, and they will let you know when they want more from these conversations. And finally, as you think about working on yourself, be attuned to your physical, mental, and spiritual well being, because being healthy in those areas will serve you well in this area. The A of the care disciplines stands for Ask Self Awakening Questions, which leads me to this question regarding political conversations. How can we respond to their questions with more questions? Curiosity is one of the best conversation tools you can bring to a political conversation. It does a lot of work for us and keeps our attitudes in check. So here's some strategies to explore. If your child asks about a political issue, ask them at least one question back before you answer. You can start with, what did you hear or see that made you ask this question? This lets your child define the issue and the scope of the issue, which will probably help you respond in an age-appropriate way. Listen to how they answer you. Don't be thinking about the issue and planning what you want to say about it in the back of your head. Actively listen. And then ask more follow-up questions. Those could include, well, what do you know about this? Or how is it making you feel? Or do you know anyone who's affected by this? Begin by asking questions of our kids to gather more information. And once you have that background, then you can respond. Another tactic that can be helpful is to ask your children how this fits into their understanding of the government. Now, this may be more helpful with older kids who have had more time to learn about our government. But if you pay attention to what your kids are learning in social studies when they're in elementary school, you'll know whether and how to bring this into the conversation or not. So knowing the basics of our government structure can help you discuss a specific issue. There are 3 branches of the government that each have specific responsibilities: the legislative branch, executive, and judicial. And those branches are designed to balance one another so they share power. So you could ask, which branch of government is involved in the issue that we're discussing? Does that align with the U.S. Constitution? Federalism refers to the fact that the U.S. Constitution makes some things the federal government's responsibility and some are the state government's responsibility. So you could ask, what level of government is working on this issue? And how would things be different if another level of government was involved? The National Constitution Center is a museum in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and there are 2 parts of their website that do a pretty good job of looking at current events and connecting them to the U.S. Constitution. So I've put links to those in the resources document for you to peruse if this is an angle on the conversation that interests your family. At some point, we have to stop asking questions and try to answer, to share what we know about a topic. But that almost always leads us to more questions because most of us are not experts. Identifying what we don't know about an issue is an important part of these conversations. We can wonder together what information would help us understand this better. Maybe you even ask, where can we find that information? So here's an example. If we were talking about education funding, you could say, I'm concerned about less money coming from the federal government to support your school too. But I don't actually know what that money pays for right now. If it were to go away, what would change in your school and what effect would that have? How about we write an email to our school board representative and ask them to send us more information? Very few of us are experts on policy issues, and that's okay. But it's important to recognize that in yourself and to say it to your kids because it challenges us to speak with humility instead of self-righteousness and to be open to learning more. The R of the care disciplines invites us to reflect theologically together, which leads us to this question in a political conversation. How can we bring God into this conversation? Doing so models to your kids how our faith shapes us and directs us outside of church walls and outside of Sunday mornings. So here are a couple of ideas. The first 2 are for you all as the grown-ups, and the third is to do more directly with your kids. Godly mindset number 1. Our faith tells us that in the eyes of God, no one is a bad guy. We are all sinners in the eyes of God, and we all make bad choices. People in power might seem worse because their choices might have negative consequences that touch more people. But theologically speaking, one sin is not worse than another. Jesus died for us all. So pay attention to how you talk about political leaders. Do your words tell your kids that some leaders are good guys and some are bad guys? That's a false dichotomy. That's not how Jesus saw the world, and we should try to avoid. Mindset number 2. We are citizens of the United States of America, but primarily, and most importantly, we are citizens of the kingdom of God. So here's what that could mean. When Jesus talked about the kingdom of God, he was referring to the place where God reigns, which is not a heavenly land separate from this one. It's right here where we are, right now. This kingdom of God is not perfect yet. It is both here and still coming. So, as citizens of the kingdom of God, that is where our allegiance lies, and we are to act in ways that will help bring that kingdom into reality. And that is what we are to do while we wait. One way we can do that is to support leaders who we think will make decisions that bring our world closer to being like the kingdom of God. If you're unfamiliar with this concept, check out the links from the Bible Project that I put in the resources document to get you started on learning more. Finally, tell our faith stories to your kids. Justice is everywhere in the Bible, but not many of us were taught that. The story of the Bible is how God is always walking with God's people through times of persecution and seemingly intractable forces that bring suffering and injustice to the world. From the Exodus to Jesus coming to earth in the midst of an oppressive Roman Empire, to the early church growing in the midst of that same hostile empire, God is always and forever getting the last word. Make sure you and your kids know this. It is the source of a lot of comfort and hope. Now, if you don't feel confident in your ability to bring faith stories and ideas into conversation, I would strongly encourage you to get your hands on a solid children's story Bible. I put some recommendations in the resources list. Make it a regular practice to read Bible stories together and notice how God acts to help people and how God teaches us to be holy people who act in God's ways. Simply start there, and over time, it will get easier to make those connections between our faith stories and the stories of what's happening in our civic life. Finally, the E of the care disciplines invites us to enact the next most faithful step, which leads to this question and a political conversation. What actions can we take in response to this conversation? There are many different ways that we could respond, so I have 3 ideas that are externally focused and 3 that are more internal. First, you can contact your legislative officials. Decide which officials who represent you are in a position to do something about the issue you care about. Is it a federal representative, someone at the state level, or someone locally? And then decide how you're going to contact them. Send an email, make a phone call, write a letter. You can even try to get a meeting. And also talk about whether your child wants to craft that communication themselves or if it's something that you do together. Connect with an organization that's working on the specific issue you care about. At the very least, you can subscribe to the organization's newsletter so that you receive information on a regular basis about the work that they are doing. You can see if there's any volunteer opportunities, even if those opportunities are only for you as an adult. If you start doing that work, you can talk about it with your children and they will learn from your example. And of course, you can always donate money to support the work of an organization, but the money doesn't just have to come from you. Help your kids organize some kind of fundraiser, a lemonade stand, snow shoveling, mulch shredding, whatever it is, get them involved in making the donation. And finally, you can attend a march or a rally if that's an option that's available to you and where you live. Another thing you can do to respond is talk to your church leaders about the issue on your mind and ask if there's any work for your church to do on the issue, or if the church has connections to people or organizations working on the issue. Do not expect any major or quick things to come from this conversation. This is a tricky time for many church leaders who are navigating different people's different ideas of what the church can or should do to respond to civic life. But if it's important to you, it is valuable for your church leader to know that you are in favor of the church doing something. And it's even better if you volunteer to help. Keep learning. There are so many children's storybooks out there these days talking about injustices and tackling hard topics for kids. Do a quick Google search to find books about the topics that matter to your kids. You can even see if your public library has some of them. It's cliche, but knowledge is power, and we never know what our kids will do with the information we give them as they grow up. But learning is always a good investment. Finally, take care of your people. This includes the people you live with, your friends, and the people you share work and community with. Pour goodness and care into one another. If you have the bandwidth to host or at least organize something social, then do it because our souls need community. I think an argument can be made that strong communities are well positioned to tackle injustices and solve problems. So care for each other because it leads to good outcomes on multiple levels. Closing thought. The beautiful thing about this experiment in self governance, known as the United States of America, is that it's still going. We are living in a particular moment in history right now, just like there have been moments before and there will be moments to come. And similarly, parenting is also a long term game. Every conversation you have with your children about politics and current events is a chance to learn and process things together. Don't feel the need to solve it or make hard things better. These topics will come up again, and you can always say more and build ideas in the future. And throughout it all, never forget God has got us every step of the way. I hope some of what you heard here will be fruitful food for thought for you and your families. I love this intersection of faith and families and politics, so don't hesitate to reach out if you'd like to talk one-on-one, or if you're not sure how to talk about a specific issue. I'm happy to talk with you. You can reach me through my website. Thank you and blessings on your continued journey with Around the Table.